5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the regular or voting meeting of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education for February 13th, 2017. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Present.
Mrs. Bradford.
Present.
Mrs. Frank.
Present.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Present.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Centers is here. President Burden is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Mrs. Frank, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. As some of you may have noticed, I am not Colleen Burton. Mrs. Burton is absent tonight, so you're stuck with me for as long as we get to go through this. And I have a little bit of a cough, so I'll try and avoid coughing into the microphone. But as I indicated, this is a regular meeting. It's a voting meeting. As Mrs. Burton typically explains, you won't hear a lot of discussion tonight because most of those discussions occur on one or two previous meetings before we ever get to this stage. And so if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of what the issues are, I suggest you tune into the Committee of the Whole meetings, which are online and are televised. For those in the audience who want to follow along with the agenda tonight, there are agendas on the table outside of the boardroom. For those at home, if you want to follow along, you can go to our website, www.livoniapublicschools.org, highlight over the board tab, and you will see a spot for the agendas. We have a relatively full meeting tonight. We got some good things going on, so we're going to get right to it. Our first item is item 3, communications, and we'll hear from Mrs. Jenkins on item A, Student Art Gallery. Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson. Good evening. Good evening, Vice President Johnson, members of the board, Superintendent Oquist. Tonight, it's my pleasure to highlight the incredible artwork, as you see behind you on display, here in the boardroom as part of our Student Art Gallery program. As you know, each month we feature the works of student artists from around the district. This month, we are recognizing students from Franklin High School. The art department at Franklin High School consists of multiple levels of drawing, painting, photography, and sculpture, and the International Baccalaureate Visual Arts Program. All of these classes are taught by Mr. Jeremy Rowe, Michelle Morton, and Ms. Tammy Blau. Approximately 350 students take part in art classes at Franklin. Some are also part of the National Art Honor Society, where they do some really cool things. My daughter's a part of that group, and I've seen it firsthand. They do community outreach projects, such as the annual Art with the Community event. During this event, students teach community members basic art skills in areas such as painting, sculpture, photography, and the like. Franklin's NAHS has also painted, the students have painted a beautiful 5-canvas mural for Newburgh Church here in Livonia. It's absolutely stunning. Tonight, the 5 students we're recognizing will receive certificates. And the certificates read Livonia Public Schools Certificate of Recognition, Student Art Gallery, Featured Artist, selected to represent the Franklin High School Art Department at the Board of Education Office. February 13th, 2017. These are signed by Superintendent Andrea Oquist and myself. Okay, their artwork will be on display. We have quite a bit on display this month, which looks really, really cool. Yeah. For about the next month here at the board office. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first artist, Miss Casey Bernhardt. And Casey is a senior. Come on up, Casey. Let's give Casey a round of applause. Which pieces are yours, and if you could also just briefly describe the medium by which you made them.
The first one is the clocks, which is color pencil with with some acrylic paint. Next to it is a self-portrait with a background. It's acrylic paint, some watercolor, and some color pencils. And then the last one's the one at the end, which is a light, which is color pencil and acrylic again.
Okay, very cool. Thank you, Casey. Next, we have Lauren Fortis, who's also a senior. There you go, Lauren. And what pieces are yours?
Mine are the three rainbow faces. They're done with acrylic. They actually go together, but they're.
We're going to rearrange those after the break.
Oh, there's three right here.
Yeah. Okay. Next, we have Shaylin Hainsworth. Shaylin is also a senior.
The pieces that I have is the bottle all the way on the left, and then the three smaller bottles in the middle, and then we have
Me too.
Very nice, thank you. Next, we have junior Rebecca, or she goes by Becca Haupt. Becca?
Mine is the key flower sculpture right there, and the flower watercolor portrait.
Okay. And I'm curious, how did you get those keys to, is that a
I soldered them.
Saturday? Okay, very nice.
Oh, that is
Thank you so much.
neat. Really cool.
And last but not least, we have Anna Sawicki. Anna is also a senior.
my three are the three women with the black border around it, and they're done in watercolor.
Very nice, thank you so much. Join me once again in congratulating these talented artists.
Outstanding, thank you. I forgot to mention, we are going to take a short break after item 3D to recognize our recipients tonight. That leads us to 3B, our Golden Apple Award. Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson. Not only do we love to recognize our students for their achievements and talents, we also enjoy the opportunity to highlight and recognize our amazing staff here in LPS. The school district established the Golden Apple Award program several years ago as a way of doing just that, to shine a light on the staff members and school volunteers who go above and beyond for our students, our schools, and our community, and they do so with particularly kind spirit and genuine care. We're so fortunate in our school district to be able to say we've amassed quite an orchard of Golden Apple recipients through the years. And it's my pleasure tonight to introduce you to our latest pick. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Dave Gluth to join me at the podium. Dave? Okay, so Dave, I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about you, if you don't mind. Maybe some things are in here that your massive fan club may not even know.
I love it.
Dave is a building supervisor at Johnson Upper Elementary, where he keeps the school running in tip-top shape. As the building supervisor, Dave performs and oversees custodial and maintenance operations, but as you'll soon see, he does so much more than even those very large tasks. Mr. Gluth has worked for Livonia schools for 30.5 years, with the last 7 years being at Johnson. He's also worked at Grant, McKinley, and Hoover in years past. No matter the school, Dave says the best part of his job is working with the students, staff, and parents. He is described as someone who is always there, willing to help, and always taking care of the building and its people. He was nominated for the Golden Apple Award by Johnson staff members Melissa Bennett, John Santee, and Kelly Tadia, if I pronounced that correctly. They were especially impressed by the care that he took during the packing and unpacking that took place before and after the building renovations this summer. According to the nomination, quote, Dave did so much to make our packing our school an easy transition. He is the conductor of our orchestra. His coworkers noted that he even came into work earlier than normal before the school year began to ensure everything was running smoothly, even though he was supposed to be off for his daughter's wedding.
Oh.
So we see that Dave Gluth takes care of the school and the staff, but we also know that he takes great care of the students too. It's not every day that a building supervisor decides to stir up some fun in the cafeteria during lunchtime. Dave saw an opportunity and a need, and he went for it, creating a lunchtime talent show for students at Johnson. On stage each day, students are encouraged to show off their talents. Some days they just, or if there are no performances on the stage, it's my understanding you just jam some music, right? Okay. Okay. Students enjoy this special opportunity, and the staff is in awe of how well Mr. Gluth manages it with structure, consistency, and control, which is not always the easiest thing to do with a cafeteria filled with 11 and 12-year-olds. You can witness the show for yourself by viewing a feature video we produced. This was, I think, last spring, or just before the end of last school year. My department produced a video, and that is housed on our district website. If you go to the district tab, click on LPS videos, and then you'll see a video called, appropriately, Lunchtime Jammin' at Johnson Upper Elementary. It is awesome. You should check it out. I should also mention that Dave is a product of LPS and actually attended Lowell Junior High, which is now Johnson. Cool. He's a graduate of Churchill High School. He's been married for 26 years, and he has 3 children. 2 have graduated, and 1 is a freshman at Franklin. Correct? At this time, I'd like to invite Trustee Liz Jarvis to the podium, and Trustee Jarvis is going to present Mr. Gluth's Golden Apple plaque. Congratulations.
Not everybody brings their own fan club. Firstly, I just wanted to say what a pleasure this is. We don't often get people who are so dedicated. It's just unspeakable, the amount of impact you have on our children, especially over at Johnson. A lot of learning happens in the classroom. A lot of learning happens outside of the classroom. You're one of those outside of the classroom type teachers. And I would like to present you with this plaque. This is your golden apple. There's a pin on the back, so there's that. And you can wear that just so everybody knows how wonderful you are. I'm going to share with you a couple things that were in the application, just so you know what they think of you. It says, Mr. Gluth is a dedicated and diligent building supervisor who displays genuine concern for the school and everything that surrounds it. He is the go-to guy at Johnson Upper Elementary. He continually goes above and beyond for Johnson's students, the staff, and the community. He is respectful, thoughtful, friendly, happy, caring, and generous. Those are either dwarves or Boy Scouts. And the list could go on and on. And Principal Deanne Urso says, it has been a pleasure to work with Dave Gluth for the past 5 years. He takes pride in his work and is never without a smile on his face. It sounds like you bring a lot of smiles, too. Thank you so much.
I'll be real brief. First of all, members of the board, hello, how are you? A big thank you to my group over there. I call them my staff. To do what I do, I couldn't do without the people that I do work with, and I've been very blessed with my whole career working with such great staffs and teachers. Same with my kids. The whole Hayes staff is here. And my kids all went through Hayes. They were absolutely terrific. I learned a long time ago that in order to be successful in a school district is everything's got to be about the kids. Kids first. And if you do that, then everything else falls into place. And I've always appreciated, I've been very lucky to work for the district for it seems like forever. People ask me how long I've been with the district, and I know he said 30 years, but I started in 1972 at Washington Elementary School. Graduated in 85, hired in 86, and that's here. So that's like 45 years of my 50 years being around that I've been with Livonia Public Schools. And hopefully I'll be here for quite some time longer. I do want to thank Mr. Santee and Mrs. Tadia and Mrs. Bennett for those nominations and those nice words. And it's good to see some of our Mrs. Ninnis back. Haven't seen her in a couple of days. So again, thank you very much. I mean, I truly love this school district, and hopefully it does show. By the way, if you guys are ever in the Johnson area between 11:15 and 1 o'clock, stop in. The place is really a fun time. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, and what a great representative of the school district. That'll move us to item 3C, Principals Week Resolution. Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson. Tonight, we would like to take a few moments to recognize the people who kind of keep everything together at our schools. Our principals are the first to arrive in the morning and the last to leave in the evening. They are there to handle any situation that may arise throughout the school day. They can be found walking our hallways, connecting with students, inspiring their staffs, rallying school spirit, and I've seen a lot of that interesting school spirit going on through the years by our principals. Cheering on our teams, calming a nervous youngster, applauding a performance, or just offering a listening ear. Their schools are truly theirs. They take ownership and lead the way in creating and maintaining a culture of high standards, mutual respect, kindness, and caring, and so much more. Each year, our district designates an official week to recognize these efforts. At this time, I'd like to ask Trustee Dan Centers to join me at the podium.
Before we do that, Mrs. Jenkins, we have a motion. Can I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolution establishing the week of February 13th through 17th, 2017 as Principals Week in Livonia Public Schools.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mrs. Jenkins.
Now at this time, I'd like to ask Trustee Dan Centers to join us. Dan is going to read the Principals Week resolution and hand that over to Johnson Upper Elementary Principal Dan Urso. Dan serves as the co-vice president of the Livonia Educational Administrators Group known as LEADS. Okay?
Whereas Principals Week is dedicated to recognizing the significant contributions of Livonia Public Schools, school principals, and the commitment to providing quality educational experiences and guidance for their students. And whereas energetic and inspiring school leadership is essential if schools, teachers, and support staff are to implement college and career-ready standards and assessments. And whereas school principals play a vital role in the success of students and act as a liaison between the school and the community it serves. And whereas we join with educators, parents, and students to raise awareness of the importance of educational leadership. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the trustees of Livonia Public Schools School Board of Education recognize the week of February 13th through 17th, 2017 as School Principals Week, and encourage all citizens to thank and support the efforts of school principals in our community.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson and members of the board, Superintendent Andre Oquist. On behalf of the LEADS organization, we'd like to thank you for this recognition and for the week. Does that mean we're off tomorrow?
Next Monday.
Next Monday. And also, I think I can speak on behalf of our whole organization. We say we serve this district with pride, and we serve the students, staff, and the community members with that same pride and passion. So I know I've been a member of the school team for a long time, and a member of Leeds for the past 13 years as well. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us in saying that we do this all with pride and passion, and we're pleased to do it each day. So thank you very much for this recognition.
Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, we have a motion made by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll?
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Bonnefield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. That moves us to item 3D, district update from the superintendents.
I think she wants to speak.
Well, good thing I'll tie it all together.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vice President Johnson. I'd just like to take a moment and piggyback on the previous honors. Certainly, congratulations to all of our attendees. We love nothing more than having our students here as points of pride to highlight. The work behind us will remain up as a tangible reminder of just one very important piece of the way that you are able to express yourself both creatively and courageously through the mediums shared behind us. Also, congratulations, Dave. You truly are someone who embodies the spirit of Livonia Public Schools. I know Johnson values you greatly, and that was certainly evident here this evening. I'd like to ask all of our principals, assistant principals, lead administrators who are here this evening, would you please stand? We could not do the work that we do, serve our students in the way that we do, without each of you, so thank you. Well, I have the pleasure of sharing a district update this evening. So oftentimes there are opportunities we have to share highlights from our schools or highlights that are shared with us. So I have a number of things to share with the board and the community this evening. First, I'd like to highlight one of our Churchill High School students, Grant Sobek, who was recognized last week by Channel 7. It was a surprise announcement in his classroom as the TV camera rolled in. Grant was nominated and received the award as one of Anne Marie's All-Stars for Channel 7. Grant is quite an amazing young man. I first had the opportunity to meet on a Leader and Me visit at Emerson. He has created something called My DigiSlips, a way of reducing paper, ink, and labor costs in schools by the use of online field trip permission slip forms. His project will be ready commercially in March. Yes, he's 15 years old. We will be piloting it in the district at Emerson Middle School, and we were so very pleased to be part of that acknowledgement along with the Churchill administration, his teacher Doug Coates, who had an opportunity to teach on TV. Mr. Coates, are you here? Great job. And Mr. Archibald, Mr. Francis, and I had a pleasure of congratulating Grant and his family, who I believe were very proud to be recognized. Continuing on with highlights from Churchill this past weekend, some of you may have been involved with that. The Kids Against Hunger meal packing event took place at Churchill. It was coordinated by our Livonia Key Club members, the Churchill Key Club members, the Churchill National Honor Society students, and the Livonia Kiwanis Early Risers Club. There were almost 200 folks there early on Saturday morning. Mr. Johnson was also one of the packers. He did a very good job and looks mighty fine in a hairnet. But an impressive 20,000 meals were packed that morning. And I have to tell you, our students were so impressive. They truly were not only coordinating the event along with the Kiwanis, they were leading the tables. They were sharing how to begin the meal packing, what the next steps were. They were truly impressive, and they were so proud of that community involvement. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that group. Last week, the Livonia Chamber of Commerce held their annual leadership banquet and award evening. It's an evening where they highlight community leaders who have made an impact, large and small businesses. They also, the bookends of the event were started with highlighting our 3 Teachers of the Year for this year, Mr. Don Stromberg, Mr. Art Colling, and Miss Amy Van Horn Gobble, who we had a chance to celebrate and highlight that evening. And one of the last awards of the evening was for the outstanding youth in Livonia, Natalie Cadot, who is a senior at Churchill High School. So we were all so proud, not only to have the opportunity to see many of our civic and community leaders with whom we partner on a regular basis, but to have the opportunity to have our staff highlighted, and certainly one of our students. It was a great evening. I know some of our music folks are here this evening, so I have a little music shout out shared with us from Stevenson High School. The Stevenson Music Department is very proud of the students that have participated in both the District Solo and Ensemble Festival last weekend and the Instrumental Music Solo and Ensemble Festival in Ann Arbor a couple of weeks ago. All of the events gave a medal-worthy performance, and 14 of the events qualified for state solo and ensemble, including 4 of our large ensembles, Girls Select, Men's Ensemble, the Village Singers, and the Nightingales. The Nightingales received a perfect score. So for someone who always dreamed of moving beyond singing Spartans, I'm so proud of our students. Additionally, Mrs. Wickman shared that the event for our instrumental students, out of the 39 events representing Stevenson, 24 events received 1s, 14 received 2s, and all of the events receiving 1 have qualified to compete in the State Solo and Ensemble Festival on Saturday, March 18th. So would you please, Mr. Turner and Ms. Wickman, wish them our very best. Our district transition team met last week for its second meeting. That team is being very ably led by Ms. Deanne Urso, Mrs. Donna McDowell, and Ms. Stacy Jenkins. I just want to provide a quick update to our community on the work of this team, and know that moving forward, we will also be including all of this information on the front of our website in a special area highlighted, similar to what we did through the process of the district enrollment and facility study. As you know, we have the district transition team, which is comprised of parents and staff and administrators from the 7 schools impacted by the closings of both Cass and Garfield. So in an effort to keep our community informed and to be able to respond to the many questions that will arise not only from staff, potentially from students and from our families, we are working with this very collaborative group to highlight what those questions, concerns, and ideas are. We will be have already begun publishing a district transition newsletter, which will be published every other week. That will be sent home via backpack mail and email to all of the families and staff at those 7 schools. It will also be available to our entire community on our website. We've also established an email address, so anyone that has questions regarding the transition are able to send those in. That information is being shared out by each of our schools. And the team has been extraordinarily hard at work, and they have just done a tremendous job. We are grateful for their efforts and grateful for their time. Beyond that, school transition teams are also being established at each of the 7 schools. Would you just give me a shout out as to the transition email address? No S? transition@livoniapublicschools.org is the main email address where those questions, et cetera, can be submitted. And also, just a quick highlight this week, Kappa will be performing their second show, Into the Woods, correct? And be sure to check it out. Thursday, Friday, or Saturday evening, there are performances at 7 p.m. each of those nights. So we always enjoy the opportunity to highlight our students, our staff, and members of our community here, and we're so pleased to have you with us here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. At this point, we're going to take a short 5 to 10 minute break to recognize our recipients tonight. Thank you. We'll be back. Thank you, and we are now back from our break. And I need to make a quick announcement. I understand that we may be having some technical difficulties with our WOW customers, and you may not be seeing tonight's meeting, or it may be choppy. Rest assured that it will be taped and it will be available probably in the next couple of days online. So we apologize for that inconvenience, but technical difficulties. We will now move on to item 3E, written communications. Are there any written communications? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3F, audience communications. This is the portion of the meeting that the board has set aside where we will listen to community members. It's not specifically designed as a question and answer. It's a time for the board to listen and hear what the community has to say. We have gotten into the habit of using a timer that may have a beep or a tone after 3 minutes. We feel that that's a little more politically correct than telling you you've hit your 3 minutes. So if you hear a 3-minute beeper, I'll ask you to wrap up your comments. In addition, the Board of Education has 3 roles. One is to hire and evaluate the superintendent, and you see we have done that. We're very happy with our superintendent. Second is to develop policy and review policies, and we've done that over the last couple of years, going through 2 full binders of policies and updating where necessary. And the third is to set long-term financial and strategic goals and aligning the budget to those goals. So if your comments tonight have anything to do with those 3 areas, you can expect to receive a response back from the board. If it concerns the day-to-day operations of the district, then you will get that back most likely from Mrs. Oquist. All right. I have a blue slip from Susan Gagnon. Susan?
Good evening. It's been a long time since I've been standing at the podium here. And I'm going to try not to make this as negative as what I felt when I first heard the nomination with Keith McDonald as the Assistant for Human Resources. I've been a paraprofessional for 18 years, and I've always been treated as part of faculty. And there is a great divide what Mr. McDonald thinks of paraprofessionals as being part of faculty. And I challenged Mr. McDonald tonight, as being human resources, your credentials speak a lot, okay? But human resources is also part of humanity.
Mrs. Gagnon, please direct your comments
No,
to the board.
but it is to him.
I understand.
It is to him.
Direct them to us, not to
Okay,
Mr. McDonald.
well, I just want to voice my disappointment in the nomination, and I hope that he proves me wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a blue slip from Jake Gates and Iris Derry from the Livonia Warriors. Welcome.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education, President Burton, and Superintendent Oquist. We are captains of the Livonia Warriors robotics team. My name is Jake Gates. I'm a sophomore at Franklin.
And my name is Iris Derry, and I'm a junior at Franklin. Our team comprises of students from Churchill, Franklin, and Stevenson. Firstly, we would like to thank those of you that attended our open door at Dickinson Center. We really appreciate the support.
Now to get you all up to speed with our kickoff and 6-week build, on January 7th, Haitian Technical Center of Plymouth opened its doors to our team. 112 LPS students, mentors, and parents gathered for our annual kickoff think tank. The day began early with a gathering of local schools at Novi High School to view a satellite broadcast of the first robotics game animation, Steamworks. Immediately following, we gathered at Haitian Technical Center with a cafeteria there turned into an institution of education, as groups of our students and mentors created a plan. After a hard day of mental work, the team slowly filed out of the building just before 8 p.m.
Steamworks is a game set in an era and time when technology relied on steam power to prepare airships for an ultimate long-distance race. In this game, each 3-team alliance prepares to take flight by building steam pressure with scoring balls, delivering gears to pilots on their airships who install and turn them to release pressure to fill the airship. Just before the airship lifts, the robots will climb a rope to get aboard their airships before the end of the game. No doubt, Steamworks will be a highly competitive game.
This game has compelled us to develop a strategy-based robot. Our hope is that this robot will become a true competitor. On February 21st, before midnight, it will be locked away in a bag, awaiting for our centerline competition on March 10th and 11th.
In closing, we are very grateful for your support and use of the Dickinson Center. It has made all the difference in the world because we are able to replicate a scale version of the Steamworks field. We also host middle school field at the Dickinson Center. We realize other schools in our area do not have these opportunities, and many bring their robots to Dickinson to practice. We offer over 100 hours of practice time to both area FTC and FRC teams. We hope by the time we come back next month, we will be down one competition and ready to tell you all the good things about it. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you for coming in tonight. Appreciate it. That concludes our audience communication, and we will move on to item 3G, response to prior audience communication. Are there any responses to prior audience communication? Seeing none, that will take us to item 4, consent agenda. And can I have a motion, please?
Yes. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of January 23rd, 2017. 5VB, minutes of the special meeting of January 23rd, 2017. 5VC, minutes of the closed session of January 23rd, 2017. 5D, minutes of the special meeting of February 6th, 2017. 5E, minutes of the closed session of February 6th, 2017. 6A, bills for payment, February 14th, 2017.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Is there any discussion or question? Seeing none, Mr. Centers, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bradford,
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield, Mrs. Jarvis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield,
Yes.
Mrs. Frank,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. The motion carries.
passes. Thank you, Mr. Centers. That will take us to item. Yes. That will take us to item 6B, approval of limited schools of choice program for 2017-2018. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent to participate in limited schools of choice under Section 105C for the 2017-18 school year. Openings to include up to 30 students at kindergarten, up to 10 students in grades 1 through 3, up to 5 students in grade 4, and up to 15 students in grades 5 through 8, for a total of up to 125 students.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers. Are there questions or comments?
If I could jump in for a second, I want to clarify, pardon me, I want to clarify in the recommendation, just for those at home or hearing this for the first time, that when it states up to 10 students in grades 1 through 3, that is in each of grades 1, 2, and 3. And then again, up to 15 students in grades 5 through 8, that would be 15 and 5, 15 and 6, 15 and 7, and 15 and 8, just for clarification's sake. That's how we get to the 125 total. So just to put that out there. Another piece I'd like to, a couple of questions I had during the week, just for clarification of the board, as well as anyone in the audience or hopefully watching at home and getting some audio on this, is that our in-district student transfer requests, we will look at those first, and in the summer, with a space availability, when we do assign the 105C out-of-district schools of choice, they will go on a space available basis. So our in-district families will have the first priority with regard to placements. If they are, that doesn't mean everyone's guaranteed anything. I'm just saying that we look at those first, and then in the summer, we'll look at the applicants for out-of-district schools of choice, place them on a space available basis. That may mean some schools don't receive out-of-district schools of choice. Some schools may not receive transfers or out-of-district schools of choice, and some schools may have grades that have space and other grades that don't. So just to clarify for those who are asking that question. Just want to make it clear.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Absolutely.
Would you also clarify the difference between school of choice and in-district transfers?
Sure, sure. When we talk in this motion and in this discussion, the 105C is the in Wayne County and the contiguous counties around, out of district, families that don't live in the boundaries of Livonia Public Schools applying for, in this limited fashion that the board is about to vote on. So those are families and students in these grades in that limited amount coming to us. Our transfer students are in-district transfers, which some people still say schools of choice with, but just to clarify, our in-district folks, we have a transfer request form because they are Livonia Public Schools families, simply requesting transfer from their school of attendance to another school of their choosing.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Any questions, Mrs. Bonnefield?
Mr. Francis, could you just mention the financial impact that this has on the district?
Yes, if we have all 125 seats filled with enrolled students from this program, we would receive approximately $1 million in additional revenue for the budget.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Jarvis.
As long as Mr. Francis is being so helpful, would you please go over the process for families who are out-of-district families who already have a student in Livonia Public Schools?
Great question, and it actually also brings me to the application timeline that I wanted to bring up, so thank you very much. First of all, the application, if the board does approve this motion, then our intention is to begin on February 21st, 2017, so that's a week from tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, and use the full 30 days allowable by the state to have an application window, so that would bring us to a close of end of school day on March 22nd, 2017. So that's the 30 days, and it's calendar days, not school days or business days. It's 30 calendar days. And with regard to siblings, very important to understand that the preference will be given to applicants, and that implies that you had to actually apply for another student, but applicants with a sibling currently enrolled in our school district. So for example, you may have a third grade student that came in the past through 105C Schools of Choice, and now you have an upcoming kindergartner. That child in kindergarten would be given preference if we go to a lottery. Thank you. Couldn't think of my word. If we end up in a lottery situation, the preference goes first to students who have a currently enrolled sibling in one of our schools. But I want to remind all families who are listening and looking into out-of-district schools of choice, if you have a child in our district now, that does not automatically get the second child or third child or other siblings in. You still must apply in the open window, in that 30-day window, and do an individual application for each and every student.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson. Just a reminder to the board and to our community, when we completed the budget forums in January of 2015, we had the opportunity to hear from hundreds of our staff members, our community members, and our parent community throughout that process. At that time, there were 4 areas identified for which the folks who gave us feedback placed a highest premium on us looking at those 4 areas as a way to bring in revenue to the district in order to maintain things like class size, programs and special opportunities for students, extracurricular opportunities, support for our learners, et cetera. And just a reminder, those 4 items were to increase pay to participate fees in the district, limited schools of choice, the sale of vacant property when appropriate, and also the consolidation of K-4 schools. So as you know, through very difficult work of the board and very careful work of the board, each of those items has moved forward based on the feedback from our community as priority areas for revenue enhancement, as opposed to cost containment or program reduction. So this is one of those 4 areas. We've had very good luck over the past over the previous years when we've participated in limited schools of choice, and we would recommend your approval this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Oquist. Any other questions? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers, to approve the Limited Schools of Choice program for 2017-2018. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. That'll move us on to item 6C, approval to purchase furniture for secondary schools 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson,
Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of secondary classroom student chairs from Interior Environments in Novi, Michigan, for a cost of $32,023.20. Secondary classroom desks from Staples Business Advantage in Livonia, Michigan, for a cost of $41,357.10, and additional loose desktops for a cost of $2,331.55, for a total cost of $75,711.85.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mr. Archibald, do you want to address this issue?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson. As you know, 6,200 student desks and 6,600 student chairs were approved for purchase this past summer. Again, we're recommending the purchase of an additional 465 desks and 660 chairs to complete the single student desk replacement at the secondary level. In addition, we're requesting to purchase 50 loose desktops, which will be stored in the warehouse. Of the desks and chairs that we're recommending purchase, we'll also store a small amount, 30 of each, in the warehouse as well. Pricing is consistent with the original rates per our initial bid. The source of funds for this purchase are the 213 bond, and we recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Questions or comments from the board? Mr. Centers.
Mr. Archibald, in the scope of progress for our secondary furniture, the overall purchase, how far along are we after this purchase?
If you're looking at just classroom student furniture, I would put it in the right around 60%.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bonifield, for the approval to purchase furniture for secondary schools 2013 bond. Mr. Centers, could you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Centers. That moves us to item 6D, approval to purchase acoustic and digital pianos, 2013 bond. May I have a motion?
Vice President Johnson,
Mrs. Frank.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of pianos from Steinway Gallery, Commerce Township, Michigan. 26 digital pianos for a cost of $84,344 and 27 upright acoustic pianos for a cost of $185,220 for a total cost of $269,564.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Mr. Archibald.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Johnson. The 26 digital pianos, the model that is the Roland HP 605. The acoustic piano is the Boston UP 118 SPE, for those keeping score at home. We did follow the normal bid process in April of 2016. 2 bids were received for the digital pianos. 3 bids were received for the acoustic pianos. The bid tabulations were provided to the board. Steinway Piano Gallery met all the district specifications for both pianos. I would like to thank Mrs. Provencher as well as all the K-12 music teachers for their involvement in the selection process. Pending the order, we will begin to receive delivery of these pianos throughout our district, K-12, within 2 to 3 weeks. The funds for this purchase are from the 2013 bond. And again, we're recommending approval of these pianos. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Bonnefield.
I just want to reiterate our thanks to the committee on the extensive amount of work and the extra time that they put in to assure us that this was the appropriate purchase for the district. So thank you for hanging in there with us.
Thank you. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that I had been approached by members of the community who were curious about whether pianos would be sent to Garfield and to Cass pending their closing. And I wanted the community to be mindful of what Mr. Archibald told us, that these pianos will be arriving within 2 to 3 weeks. So those schools are included because they will certainly get use out of those pianos this year.
Mrs. Jarvis. Any other questions or comments?
That is correct. I also, if I can add to that, we are currently planning to use some repurposed existing, some of our older pianos at a couple of the high schools. So those pianos, when we're done with this school year, then will go to one of the high schools to replace the repurposed machine. So we're not just purchasing them for a short window here, but they will go to the 2 schools mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bradford, for the approval to purchase acoustic and digital pianos 2013 bond. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, motion passes. Yay.
Music friends.
Those are the enthusiastic music teachers you hear to our right.
It could have been a little more rhythmic. There you go. All right, 6E, approval of bid results for Caterpillar Wheel Loader 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of a 2017 Caterpillar 926M wheel loader from Michigan Cat, Novi, Michigan, for a total cost of $103,985.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. And Mr. Francis.
Yes, thank you. The 2017 Caterpillar 926M wheel loader is needed to replace the 1998 Caterpillar 928 that the district has. And we actually literally will be replacing it because we will be getting a $35,000 credit for the Cat 928 that we currently have, which has cost us nearly $20,000 the past couple of years in upkeep. Therefore, we'd like to make this replacement for the work and the load in the fleet. So the Michigan Cat, Novi, Michigan, was the lowest responsible bidder in the My Deal Extended Purchasing Program.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions or comments? Mr. Centers.
Mr. Francis, what fund will the finances of this be coming out of?
You know, I think we have a typo here on it says on your cap sheet that it says the 2013 sinking fund, which is not really possible.
Right.
So it's actually the 2013 bond. My apologies for the mistake on there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for finding that.
Other questions or comments? Mrs. Bonnefield.
Mr. Francis, can you just give us a little bit of why we need and what we use it for?
Sure. It's going to be used year-round for multiple purposes, but I would say that the team would, they had to vote for the most important item we have would be whenever we get a snow event of 4 or 5 inches or more, they really use that both for loading salt into the salt trucks as well as moving when you push with our plows, the snow in the lots up against one area, it eventually becomes too much. We bring in the cat to lift that out of the way and roll it out into the field a little further and spread it on. So, but it's going to be used for multiple items, hauling, pushing, just all kinds of varieties of reasons.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? For those of us who played with Tonka toys.
I'm going to charge you tickets.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Center, supported by Mrs. Bonifield, to approve bid results for Caterpillar Wheel Loader 2013 bond. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. That brings us to item 6F, approval of commissioning agent for Churchill High School renovations 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to appoint Sellinger Associates for the Churchill High School bond project at a cost of $43,500 plus $8,700 in project contingency for a total cost of $52,200, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of the Board of Education.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Francis.
Yes, thank you. Sellinger Associates is the current commissioning agent for professional services related to bond projects. They have been since the 2014 projects. Usually, most of the things that we talk about, people can pretty much understand what we're talking about and referencing to, but commissioning agent sounds a little vague. So just so you know, it's essentially a third-party, independent company that works upon our behalf to ensure quality work in areas such as HVAC systems, electrical, lighting, et cetera, plumbing and whatnot on the construction projects that we're moving forward with. So the bond team has been satisfied with Sellinger's work, so they'd like to recommend Sellinger be re-engaged for the 17 project that's coming up at Churchill High School. Their commissioning cost is right on target with our budget line item, and we recommend them to, through the change order, be re-engaged again for the 17 bond project.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, for the approval of commissioning agent for Churchill High School renovations 2013 bond. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion passes. That'll take us to item 6G, approval of security firm for Churchill High School renovations 2013 bond. May I have a motion?
Vice President Johnson.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to appoint Security Designs for the Churchill High School bond project at a total cost of $44,333, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of the Board of Education.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers. Mr. Francis, you're popular tonight.
I know it. It's tough doing it. Security Designs is actually the current security firm that's related to the bond projects. They have been since the 2014 projects. And similarly to Sellinger, we have the contracts written that we can either go out to bid for a new company, or if we are satisfied with their production and their work, we can re-engage them the next year. We would like to do that again, as we've done in the past. So the bond team has been satisfied with their work, and we'd like to re-engage and recommend Security Design for the 2017 project at Churchill High School.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mr. Centers, for approval of security firm for Churchill High School 2013 bond. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Centers. That brings us to item 6H, approval of environmental consultant for Churchill High School renovations 2013 bond. Mr. Francis.
Do you want to read the recommendation?
Would you like a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey,
Can I have a motion, please?
I'm right with you.
You can't make the motion. Can I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to appoint Arch Environmental Group for the Churchill High School Bond Project for a total cost of $95,113, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of the Board of Education.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Now, Mr. Francis.
Thank you. The environmental consultant will actually assist the project team in managing the asbestos abatement and lead testing that's going to be occurring. This includes developing bidding documents, project management, air monitoring, oversight of government regulations, and whatnot. And we actually have a bid from Arch Environmental that came in slightly under our $100,000 budget for this. And we, again, would like to re-engage Arch. They've been working with us since last year's 2016 bond project. We've been satisfied with their work and would like to re-engage them again.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have
Just a quick comment.
Superintendent Rehnquist.
Thank you. Just a quick comment as we go through a number of pretty meaty items here. I know you mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting, but always worth reminding as folks may just be tuning in. We know it is a Monday night must-see event, our board meetings, for the television audience. But just a reminder that these topics are covered extensively by members of our cabinet team, with extensive review by our Board of Education, beginning at our study session, and then following the study session at our committee meeting. So again, last week, it took quite a while, but we went through each of these items along with Scott Smith, our owner's rep from Plant Moran Cressa, in tremendous detail with regard to the purpose of each of these consultants, the work that they would be completing, the scope of the work specifically at Churchill, as has been our process throughout. So although we are dealing with significant sums of money, and the board is moving through these as appropriately, just a reminder that we previously spend significant time on each of these, reviewing them in great detail.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist.
You're welcome.
That's important to point out. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bradford, for the approval of environmental consultant for Churchill High School renovations 2013 bond. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion carries. That brings us to item 6I, approval of bid results for asbestos abatement at Churchill High School 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mrs. Frank.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to appoint the contract award for abatement at Churchill High School to Global Green Services Group, Dearborn Heights, Michigan, for a cost of $455,191 and contingency funds of $91,038 for a total cost of $546,229. And authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of the Board of Education.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. Mr. Francis.
Yes, sir. Global Green was the low responsible bidder. We did have an open bid on the asbestos abatement for Churchill High School 2017 bond Phase 4. And the recommendation for that asbestos abatement project, we need to provide the necessary environmental work in preparation for construction. The asbestos must be abated prior to going in and doing the actual construction work. So we do recommend, and just as a point of reference, the bid came in as a total with contingencies of $546,229, which was just slightly over what we had line item budgeted, the total at $540,000 for this project. So we're on target.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Questions or comments from the board? Mr. Centers.
Just for reference, where in the building are a majority of the abatement process is taking place?
We're going to start off, actually quite soon, we're going to be starting for spring break in the auditorium. And they're going to be abating in the auditorium area. We're going to make sure that's sealed off appropriately while they work on it. But as they go through the project, things like the flooring, when we change the tile in the classrooms, that needs to be abated properly. Items around pipings, et cetera, that needs to be abated properly. So it's a rather large project at Churchill. In fact, it's our largest to date. Churchill has a little bit more extensive asbestos use in it. Therefore, it's going to be a little bit more to abate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Frank.
Just to follow up on what Superintendent Oquist said, the amount of money is not lost on any of us that we're spending for this, but we also have a responsibility to keep our workers and our students safe. So although we had significant discussion about this last time, in our last meeting, we just wanted the public to know that we do realize that could be, that money could go far in a classroom. However, we can't use the bond money for the classroom as well. So just so that point of clarification for the community, that it is a large sum of money, but it also is very dangerous, not very dangerous, but also work that is costly to remove.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Any other questions? And I would also note that we are pretty much on budget. We had budgeted numbers close to this for this abatement.
Right, agree.
All right, thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bonifield, for the approval of bid results for asbestos abatement at Churchill High School, 2013 bond. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mr. Johnson?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Centers. I also want to thank Scott Smith, who is here tonight from Plant Morehouse. He's been here for the entire meeting. In case we had questions, we appreciate that, Mr. Smith. That moves us to item 6J, recommendation to relocate Western Wayne Skill Center to Garfield. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public School District relocate the Western Wade Skill Center programs to Garfield Elementary School.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Dr. Terrio.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson, board members, and Superintendent Oquist for this opportunity to again speak to you about the wonderful programs at the Western Wayne Skill Center. I would first like to commend the staff, building leadership, Mary Jarvis and Rick Dubé, and the principal behind me, Patrick Meese, for their hard work and thoughtful planning and ideas for the relocation of the Western Wayne Skill Center. Again, just as a reminder, as you know, the Western Wayne Skill Center services students with moderate cognitive impairments and autism for students ages 18 to 26 from 11 school districts across Western Wayne County. The Skill Center also houses the Wayne Westland Physically Impaired Program for young adults. In total, we service approximately 200 students every day. Our program focuses on job training, independent living skills, and leisure and recreational activities. We have many students out in the community every day at job sites such as City Hall, CVS, Livonia Public Schools, Meyer, Jackson Center, Madonna University, Cintas, and JCPenney, just to name a few. We have students who also take classes in-house, as well as in areas such as food preparation, horticulture, landscaping, car care, daily living skills, and woodshop.
And we also provide a well-rounded young adult education by promoting leisure and rec activities such as art and music appreciation and fitness. Pat and I have met with building leadership, staff, parents, some of whom are here, students, regarding the relocation of the Western Wayne Skills Center. We have listened to their priorities for classes, spaces, and activities in person and through the community forum, feedback, and letters. We have also had conversation with all 11 sending districts, including transportation departments. We have reviewed the buildings that were available to house the Western Wayne Skills Center, and after lengthy review of Cass, Perrinville, and Garfield buildings, taking into consideration the needs of the program, including 27 buses in the morning and afternoon, classroom sizes, and layout of the building offerings such as a stage area, adult-sized restrooms, and location of the building within our community, we agreed that Garfield provides the most optimal relocation for the programs within the Western Wayne Skills Center. In addition, the Great Start Readiness Program, which services our at-risk 4-year-olds, is currently located within Garfield. In discussion and communication with the staff and supervisors of this program, they would like to remain together in one location. And again, in review of the building layout, licensing requirements of the program, transportation, and the staff desire to remain together, we would like to recommend that GSRP also remain at Garfield.
Thank you, Dr. Terrio. Questions or comments from the board? No questions? Dr. Terrio, we will need some renovations at the school, correct?
That is correct. Some renovations will be completed before the Western Wayne Skills Center is relocated into the building, and we will do some renovations over the summer as well for GSRP.
What's the timetable for the complete move into Garfield?
Our goal would be moving the students sometime around the beginning of second semester, but it depends on meeting with the architects and the scope of the renovations within Garfield to meet the needs of our 18 to 26-year-old students. Again, speaking with some of the parents, looking at opportunities to change the way we think about that program and make it more into a young adult program, meeting more of their specific needs.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Center, supported by Mrs. Bonifield, to relocate the Western Wayne Skills Center to Garfield. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Centers. That'll take us to item 7, personnel matters. And our first item is A, appointment of Assistant Director of Human Resources. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and appoint Keith McDonald for the position of Assistant Director of Human Resources beginning February 27, 2017.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Oquist or Mr. Winery?
It would be me.
Oh, goody.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson. I'd like to cover a little bit about the process for filling both of these vacancies, and then we'll talk about each of these individuals separately. We were very, very fortunate to have a tremendous pool of highly qualified candidates and applicants for both positions, and we appreciate their willingness to go through what was a pretty significant and rigorous process, including multiple interviews, extensive conversations with our cabinet team, with myself, and members of our district administration team, and being involved in performance tasks related to these roles. And I would like to, again, share our thanks for everyone who was involved in that process. And I'd like to make a special acknowledgement to our cabinet team who dedicated many, many hours to this process and were very integral throughout this process the past few weeks. So let me share with you a little bit about Keith McDonald. Keith McDonald has been with Livonia Public Schools for 17 years. He has served as a teacher, an assistant principal, is currently the principal of Churchill High School. Keith has been president of the Leads organization, who we highlighted here this evening. was chief negotiator for Leeds, was instrumental in supporting the implementation of 5D+, our new teacher evaluation system, and currently serves as the KLA president. Keith has served on our district's evaluation committee, the implementation team for our climate and culture work, and has worked to prepare himself for this role in myriad ways. He holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Michigan, a Master's in the Art of Teaching, and an Educational Specialist degree in Administration and Supervision. The cabinet team and I would like to extend our warm welcome to Mr. McDonald and our recommendation to the board for his approval this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Oquist. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, for the appointment of Assistant Director of Human Resources. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion passes. Congratulations.
Could we invite Mr. McDonald up?
Absolutely.
Of course.
First, I want to thank the board and Superintendent Oquist for this opportunity. I'm real excited to get to work on the 27th and in the transition phase over the next couple of weeks. Also like to say thank you to all cabinet and look forward to working with them. It's a great group of people who operate as a tremendous team, and happy to be included as part of that team. On a sad note, I'm going to be missing my Churchill community. And 14 of my 17 years have been spent there in multiple roles, and I will greatly miss the people, the teachers, the students, and the community at a whole. It's a great place, and I think it's I know everybody knows about Churchill, but I think it's a little hidden gem that there's a lot of great things that happen there that some people don't really give a lot of recognition to. So, and then to my wife and my son, my big supporters. I kind of have to apologize to my son, though, because I can't go to swim lessons anymore on Monday nights. Although I think the true apology needs to go to my wife, who now has to get in the pool at Churchill, which is 79 degrees in Wakefield. So, but I want to thank both of them for all their support as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you. That will move us to item 7B, appointment of Chief Academic Officer. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson,
Mrs. Bradford.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and appoint Teresa O'Brien for the position of Chief Academic Officer beginning February 27th, 2017.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mr. Centers. Superintendent Oquist.
Yes. Again, very pleased to share with you a little bit about Teresa O'Brien. Here with us this evening. Teresa has been a member of Livonia Public Schools for over 25 years, having taught in grades 1 through 6. She also spent time in the curriculum department as a mathematics facilitator, was a teacher leader, and has been an elementary principal for the past 7 years at both Hayes Elementary and most recently Cooper Upper Elementary. In her role, she's contributed to numerous district committees, including the Priority Standards work, and most recently as chair of the Elementary Report Card Committee. Teresa has also been a member of QAR, our Quality Assurance Review Team, for many, many years, including being a visiting chairperson on a number of occasions. She is an alumni of our Galileo Leadership Consortium. Teresa holds 2 master's degrees, one in curriculum and instruction and one in educational leadership. She also just recently completed her central office certification program through Oakland University. As a respected educational leader, we know she will bring her passion for teaching and learning to Livonia Public Schools, which will be quite impactful.
Thank you, Superintendent Oquist. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mr. Centers, for the appointment of Chief Academic Officer. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion carries.
I'm probably louder than you. Thank you, Board of Education, Superintendent Oquist, and the cabinet. And to mirror what Mr. McDonald said, I feel blessed to be a part of Livonia Public Schools all these years. I've had many opportunities to lead and to learn, and I bring with me each interaction with teachers and administrators and students to this role. I look forward to serving our district in this big shoes to fill that Mrs. Alice has left, and being a part of the Division of Instruction. So I'm looking forward to the 27th also, and the next 2 weeks growing into some pieces of the role. I brought with me tonight my husband and my son Ian, and my mom and dad are in the back. They didn't want to sit in the front row and be on television. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That'll take us to item 7C, teachers for approval. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson,
Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and offer employment for the 2016-17 school year to the teachers listed on the attached document.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mr. Winery.
Good evening.
Good evening.
These teachers have been interviewed along with other applicants for the vacancies that we've had in the district. And we believe that these teachers are the most qualified for the positions at hand. And we recommend that they be approved for employment. Would add that these positions are currently budgeted in this year's budget. And we recommend approval of the employment for these teachers.
Thank you, Mr. Winery. Questions, comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bonifield, for the approval of teachers. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Centers. That moves us to item 7D, teachers for tenure. May I have a motion, please?
Vice President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and grant tenure status to the following teachers, effective on their respective dates. Joseph Bublitz, February 13th, 2017. Kelsey Duff, February 27th, 2017.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Winery.
Thank you. Affirmative reports and tenure recommendations have been received from the principals for the individuals that you've listed, and they complete the required years of probation in the Livonia system on the date specified in this report. So administration heartily recommends approval of their tenure.
Thank you, Mr. Winery. Any questions or comments from the board?
Congratulations.
Yes, indeed. Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, to grant tenure status to specified teachers. Mr. Centers, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Centers. It takes us to item 8, hearing from board members. We have 2 items that are up for first reading on board policies. And just so everyone is aware, there's not a vote on these tonight. This is just the first reading. They will be before the board on a voting meeting at next month's regular voting meeting. The first item that we have is item A, first reading of board policy. Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you, Vice President Johnson. The bylaws of the board, as you noted, BCB, board operations, procedures during meetings. We have a list of agenda items as we currently run through them for each voting meeting. The board does have the prerogative, as the board president sets the agenda, to move these items as appropriate. However, through our work as a pilot board superintendent team, as part of our high-impact school governance work, we have been involved in extensive conversations related to one of the vital behaviors identified as part of that high-impact school governance. That piece focuses really on the ability for a district to highlight, celebrate, and promote its programs, its people, and the opportunities for students available in the district. One of the items that the board had requested is normally the reports from the superintendent takes place at had previously taken place at the end of the meeting, and a request was made that the district update from the superintendent be moved up to the communications portion of the meeting, while we perhaps have folks still viewing the meeting from home. And so we were very happy to accommodate that. Instead of the term reports from the superintendent, it will now be titled District Update from the Superintendent, and that will be part of the communications portion of the agenda earlier in the meeting. We would then move on. This would be the first reading of the board policy. We would bring this back again next month for your formal approval.
Thank you, Superintendent Oquist.
You're welcome.
The next item is item 8B, BHA Code of Ethics. Again, this is a first reading. Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you. Our Board of Education does an outstanding job in really holding themselves to the highest standards and ethics in the work that they complete each and every day, and certainly as part of our meeting procedures. A number of years ago, the board established a code of ethics that are written, have been established, and that are voted upon every year. In addition, that code of ethics hangs, yes, just wanted to be certain it was still there, hangs behind the board as a reminder, as a tangible reminder of this commitment. Each year, the Code of Ethics is reviewed by members of the Board of Education. This year, as indicated in the areas in red, there were a few minor changes. What I'd like to do is just highlight those changes, and then that would constitute our first reading of this policy. The first bullet is regarding making decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and seeking to develop and maintain schools that meet the individual needs of children, regardless of their excuse me, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, height, weight, marital status, handicap, or disability. There was simply a change in order of those items, and it's reflected of our most recent communications from the Federal Office of Civil Rights with regard to the non-discrimination clause that is to be included in all of our communications. So this reflects the order indicated on that document. The two new additions to the Board of Education Code of Ethics. The first one is, I will be a personal advocate for the good work of the district. The second is, I will follow established board operating procedures. Although that was alluded to in one of the following bullets, that was made more explicit by utilizing that as its own item. On the second page, one of the bullets has been rewritten to read, I will respect the consensus and decisions of the board and support their implementation. So there was just a minor change of words there to make that a little bit more easily understood. I may have missed, did I miss the day-to-day operations on the first page? In the fourth bullet, just a note that we included.
The hyphens.
Yes, the hyphens in day-to-day operations. Sorry about that. And the last change that was made, as board president, there are 4 bullets identified that are the responsibility of the board president. The second one will now read, I will advise persons addressing the board to do so in a respectful manner and not allow rude and indecent behavior, profane or indecent discourse to be directed at the board, superintendent, or others during board meetings. And that language was changed to reflect current board policy and to utilize the same wording that is included in our current board policy with regard to that item. Those are the changes recommended by the board and that were considered in both our study session and the committee meeting.
Thank you, Superintendent Oquist. And again, those are first readings, and they will be on the agenda for next month's meeting. That brings us to item 8C, hearing from board members. And as it has become customary, instead of having 6 or 7 board members up here sort of reiterating what the last person said, we've chosen one person to sort of speak for the board, and then the remainder of the board, if they have additional comments, they can chime in at the end. And this week, we've given this task to Mrs. Bradford, a newbie.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I do get the distinct honor of doing the hearing from board members this week, so I'm looking forward to it. First off, I would like to congratulate the Franklin High School artists. Obviously, they've all left probably to do homework. Maybe they're creating more artwork, let's hope. It's just wonderful that we can highlight the talents of art in our district, especially from a broad perspective. I just love looking at it. It brightens up our room, and we appreciate all the kids and all the artwork and talent and creativity. So thank you for doing that and bringing your artwork to us. I'd also like to congratulate the board would Dave Gluth, the Golden Apple winner. Obviously, he was very loved based on the crowd tonight and well respected at Johnson. I know lunchtime management can be very difficult, and he seems to be able to do that with a lot of love and care for the kids. So that's great. Yeah, this is ringing. Thank you. Way to go, school principals. We recognize and applaud your great leadership. Everyone knows the principal always inspire a building, and we recognize your hard work and dedication on a daily basis. Thank you for always putting kids first and all your efforts to make our schools great every day. We really applaud all your efforts. And of course, I get the great pleasure to congratulate our newest cabinet members, Keith McDonald, Assistant Director of Human Resources. Welcome aboard, and we look forward to working with you. And also to Teresa O'Brien on your appointment of Chief Academic Officer. Yes, you have big shoes to fill, but I know you'll do a great job. We all know. Yes, we look forward to working with you also. And lastly, several of our board members, well, Crystal and I being newbies on the board, we've been taking a lot of classes through the CBA classes, and we just went to one in Troy recently, Community Relations Leadership in Troy. It's going well. We are trying to we need to take about 9 classes. We have 2 years to take them, and so far Crystal and I have taken 5 or 6, I think. Mm-hmm. So we're well on our way to getting our certification, and we're hoping to do that as soon as possible, because the more information we can garner on our roles, the better for us. So we're working diligently. We just want to let everybody know that. I also recently went to a workshop for down at the RISA, Wayne County RISA. It was for new board members, and that was also a great workshop to attend. So other than that, does anybody else have anything to add?
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. Other comments? Mrs. Bonifield.
I just want to reiterate some of the things that I said earlier and extend that. We have, and maybe Mrs. Oquist, you might want to just fill in some of this, but we have so many people, including the teachers who did worked on the pianos, that do committee work for us in the background, and that are doing the transition work, and that do a lot of work in the district and really represent with all their heart the people that and the students that they're working toward. And it's an amazing amount of people, I think, that do the background work that bring it all together so that we can sit and what seems like just flip through pages and pass motions, but the amount of time and work and that goes into this and the trust that these people have developed, I can't say enough about the committee work and the behind the scene work and the people who don't ever get recognized or necessarily get that pat on the back, but who do an extreme amount of work. And this is parents, staff, all the stakeholders that contribute to this and contribute to the time. So I really appreciate that. And sometimes we do ask them to go above and beyond and do a little extra work for us. And you know what? They always step up and really do a great job. And I can't say enough about the people who really, with all their hearts, step up to help us to get to this point where we're at here. We, I think, have one of the, sometimes it's a hard job, but there's a lot of background work that goes into it, and a lot of people bring a lot of information to us, and we couldn't do it without them.
Thank you, Mrs. Banfield. Anything else? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I would just like to say happy birthday to PTA. This week we'll be celebrating Founders Day, which is celebrating the establishment of PTA in America. Livonia is a very strong PTA community. We appreciate everything that the parents and the teachers and all the members of PTA do. If you haven't yet joined PTA in Livonia, please do so and be part of that very, very strong and successful team.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvis. Anything else? Mr. Centers.
I just want to take a second and thank Jake and Iris who came and told us about the Livonia Warriors and updated us with all the activities going on with their team. It's maybe a little nerve-wracking for some students to come up and speak in front of the board and on TV, but they did a great job, calm, cool, and collected. So it's always great to have students come and share the things happening at their schools. Thanks.
Anything else? I want to reiterate that because I did go to the open house. I think it was the first.
Yep.
And it was open for an hour and a half, and I should have known better because I went last year. And I thought, well, I'm just going to stop in for 10 minutes. I was there for almost 2 hours. I couldn't leave. Talking to these kids, they are just outstanding. And they're able, there was a 9th grader from Emerson sitting at a computer. His name is Manuel. And I asked him what he was doing, and I sort of expected a 9th grader to turn around and look at me and just he fully engaged in the conversation. He was as comfortable talking to me as he was to any of his classmates. He knew what he was doing. He's designing wiring schematics for the robot, 9th grader. It's just incredible. And when you walked around to see the different areas, you have some students working on CAD. You have some students working on the fabrication. You have some students working on the actual construction. And these kids are all going to get together to build a robot. And at that age, to be able to come together and work, it was incredible. And if you ever get a chance to go to the competitions, go and see it. They are outstanding. The other thing I wanted to give a shout out as well, I was there Saturday morning at Churchill, and we were supposed to be there for an hour, almost 2 hours. And these kids were so efficient that we were done in about an hour and 15 minutes, packing 20,000 of these packets. And it was mostly the high school students. There were very few real adults supervising, and these kids had it down. They had it down to a science. They knew exactly what they were doing, and it was a production line. Boom, boom, boom. And each table almost had a little competition between the other tables. Happy to say, out of the 20,000, I think my table put together 15,000. Not because of what I was doing, but it was amazing to see those kids and what they were able to do. And we thank them from the bottom of our hearts. It was wonderful. Anything else? Seeing none, we've come to the end of the agenda. Is there any more business to bring brought before the board tonight? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.